Okay, so I like to record the review solutions since we don't always have time to go over everything in class. So the recording I put out there on my website for everybody to see. We're going to solve each of these for x. So this x is kind of already by itself, but I got to get rid of this 18. If I take 42 and I subtract 18 from it, I get 24 is equal to a negative 4x. So when I divide both sides by a negative 4, I get x is equal to negative 6. If I go ahead and subtract 8 from both sides, I have a negative 5w is equal to a negative 45. When I divide by a negative 5, a negative divided by a negative is going to give me a positive 9 for an answer. On this problem, the minute I see this fraction, I'm going to multiply this side by 3, and I'm going to multiply this side by 3. When I multiply this first one by 3, the 3's would cancel, leaving me just n. When I multiply the second one by 3, 3 times 8 is going to be 24. And negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. Adding 24 to both sides, n is going to be equal to 18. 24 take away 6. Again, once I see fractions, I'm going to go ahead and multiply by a negative 3. I want this to be positive. And if I multiply one side, I've got to multiply the other. Negative 3 times 13 is negative 39. When I multiply by a negative 3 here, it would cancel and become a 1. When I multiply a negative 4 times a negative 3, I would get a positive 12. Subtracting 12 from both sides, w is equal to a negative 51. I see a fraction, I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. 4's cancel on this first time when I distribute, giving me 3x. And 4 times a negative 7 would be negative 28. 8 times 4, 32. Adding 28 to both sides is going to give me 3x is equal to 60. And when I divide both sides by 3, I get x is equal to 20. Again, it doesn't really matter. I see I have x's on both sides. I'm going to multiply both sides by 6. Don't forget this negative is here. Negative 6x. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. What's going to happen when I multiply by 6? The whole reason for doing it, this first one would cancel, leaving me negative x. And when I multiply this one by 6, I'd get negative 12. 6 times x would be 6x, and 6 times 5 would be 30. X is larger on the right, so I'm going to add x to both sides. I have a negative 12 is equal to 7x plus 30. If I subtract 30 from both sides, I have a negative 42 is equal to 7x. So when I divide by 7, I get x is equal to a negative 6. I want to move x to where x is the biggest if I can. So I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. Make sure that you bring this negative down with this 9. 7 minus 4x is 3x plus 12. Subtracting 12 from both sides, I now have a negative 21 is equal to 3x. So when I divide both sides by 3, I get x is equal to a negative 7. This time the variable isn't larger on either side. When that happens, you're either going to get all real numbers or no solution. Since 13 is equal to 13, the answer is all real numbers. And if you want a shortcut to write that, you can write this R with a double leg. It stands for all real numbers. Distribute the negative 3. Make sure that it only gets distributed through the parentheses, that it doesn't get multiplied by this negative 5. Negative 3b plus 24 minus 5. Distributing the 9, again making sure it just goes through the parentheses. 9b plus 18 plus 1. Negative 3b, putting together my like terms, 24 minus 5 is 19, equals 9b plus 19. b is larger on the right. I'm going to add 3b to both sides. I now have 19 equals 12b plus 19. If I subtract 19 from both sides, I have 0 is equal to 12b. So when I divide by 12, I get b is equal to 0. Distributing the negative 4, negative 8 plus 12x equals 7. Distributing the negative 2, be sure you attach that sign to it, negative 2x plus 6. On the right side, I do need to combine some like terms. 7 plus 6 is 13. X is larger on the left-hand side, so I'm going to add 2x to both sides. I have a negative 8 plus 14x is equal to 13. If I add 8 to both sides, I get 14x is equal to 21. When I divide by 14, I should simplify this fraction. They're both divisible by 7. If I divide it by 7, I'd get 3 over 2. I see a fraction, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. On this side, I'm going to multiply by 3. On this side, I had some parentheses, so I'm going to put a bracket around it. I'm going to multiply it by 3. Here I have to distribute it. When I distribute, this 3 would kind of cancel out, leaving me 2x. And 3 times 9 would become 27. 3 times 5 is 15, so there's actually a 15 out in front of this parenthesis. So I have 2x plus 27 is equal to 15x minus 16. Subtracting 2x from both sides, 27 is equal to 13x minus 60. Adding 60 to both sides, 87 is equal to 13x. And if I take 87 and divide it by 13, it won't go into it. So 87 over 13 would simply be my answer. Multiplying by that lowest common denominator, which in this case would be 8. 2 goes into 8 4 times. 4 times 1 is 4, so I have 4d. 8 goes into 8 once, so I'd have 1 times 3, which is 3. 8 times a negative 2, negative 16d. Because this variable is already by itself, I'm going to go ahead and subtract the 4d from both sides, leaving me 3 equals a negative 20d. And I'm going to divide both sides by negative 20. So d equals a negative 3/20. I see fractions, so I'm going to multiply by the lowest common denominator, which in fact would be 2 in this case. When I distribute, these first 2's would cancel out, leaving me 5x. The next one would become minus 2x. When I multiply by 2, 2 times 3 is 6. When I multiply this one by 2, the 2's would cancel out, leaving me a 1. 1 times 3 is 3x. 5x minus 2x is 3x. If I subtract 3x from both sides, you're going to see that I end up with 0 is equal to 6, which is obviously not true, so there is no solution. I see a fraction. I'm going to multiply by 2 on both sides. The 2's are going to cancel out here, leaving me x. A minus a negative is going to become plus 3. And 15 times 2 is 30. If I subtract 3 from both sides, I get x is equal to 27. Distributing, I have 42 minus 12p equals 12p plus 42. Don't think that they cancel each other out. They are on opposite sides of the equal sign. If I add 12p to both sides, I now have 42 equals 24p plus 42. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 42 from both sides. Please make sure that when you're on one side of an equal sign that you don't just say, well, I know these cancel out, so these cancel out. When they cancel out on this side of the equal sign, there's actually a 0 holding its place. I could write plus 0, we just don't write that. I'm going to divide both sides by 24, and obviously p is still going to be 0. Distributing, 3 times w, 3w, 3 times 7, 21, plus 11. 5 times w, 5w, 5 times a negative 4, negative 20, plus 2. Combining like terms, 3w plus 32 equals 5w minus 18. Subtracting 3w from both sides, I now have 32 is equal to 2w minus 18. Adding 18 to both sides, I have 50 equals 2w. So when I divide by 2, I get w is equal to 25. Number 17 is pretty simple, nothing to distribute or anything. Subtract 7 from both sides. Negative 20 equals a negative 5a. Divide both sides by a negative 5. Negative divided by a negative makes a positive. 5 goes into 24 times, and that's equal to a. Distributing the 9, 4n plus 3 equals 9n minus 9 minus 5n. Combining like terms, 5n minus 5n is 4n minus 9. If I subtract 4n from both sides, 3 is equal to negative 9, which is not true. So this has an empty set for an answer. Distribute. Distribute. 2 times x, 2x. 2 times 3 plus 6. Distribute. Negative x minus 2 plus 3x plus 1. And then combining like terms, 6 minus 5 is 1. Negative x plus 3x is 2x. And 3 take away 2 is 1. If I subtract 2x from both sides, I see that 1 is equal to 1, so my answer is all real numbers. Distribute, distribute, distribute. 4y minus 24 plus 10 equals 2 times 7, 14, minus 2y minus 3y minus 3. Combine like terms, 4y minus 14 equals negative 5y plus 11. Add 5y to both sides. 9y minus 14 equals 11. If I add 14 to both sides, 9y is equal to 25. And I'm going to have a fraction in my answer here, 25 over 9. Number 21, I see fractions, so I'm going to multiply by the lowest common denominator. This happens to be on the outside of my parentheses, so I'm going to multiply both of them by 6. This 6 is going to cancel out, so I have 5 times 2x plus 1. 3 is going to go into 6 twice, and 2 times 2 is 4, so I have 4 times x plus 4. Distribute 10x plus 5 equals 4x plus 16. Subtract 4x. 6x plus 5 is equal to 16. Subtract 5. 6x is equal to 11. So x is equal to 11 divided by 6. I see a fraction. I'm going to wrap a bracket around this side because I see parentheses. I'm going to wrap a bracket around this entire side. Again, I saw parentheses. Now, this is a little different than some of them that we did in class. Because I have this 7 here outside of the parentheses, 7 times 4 is 28. This was in the parentheses. But I got to remember this 4 also had to go to this 2. And 4 times 2 became 8. If this 2 had been in the parentheses, it just would have been 28 times those parentheses. This 4 is going to cancel out, leaving me 3 times 12h minus 32. And I've got 28 times 3, which is 84h. I have 28 times 2, which is a negative 56. Plus 8 equals 12 times 3 is 36h. And 3 times that, 32, is going to be negative 96. Combining like terms, I have 84h minus 48 equals 36h minus 96. H is bigger on the left, subtract 36h. I get 48h minus 48 equals a negative 96. Add 48 to both sides. 48h equals a negative 48. So h is going to be equal to a negative 1. I see a fraction. I'm going to multiply by the lowest common denominator. This one's going to cancel out, leaving me 5y. 3 times 2 is 6y. 3 times negative 7 is negative 21. I like to move y where it's the biggest, but this y doesn't have anything attached to it, so I'm going to subtract 6y. I now have a negative y equals a negative 21. When I divide by a negative 1, I get y equals 21. I see fractions, the lowest common denominator between 5, 2, and 4 would happen to be 20. 5 is going to go into 20 4 times. So 4 times 4x is 16x. Minus 3 times 20, 60. 2 goes into 20 10 times. 10 times x is 10x. 4 goes into 20 5 times. 5 times 1 is 5. Subtracting 10x from both sides, I now have 6x minus 60 equals 5. Adding 60 to both sides, I see fractions. I'm going to multiply by the lowest common denominator. 3 goes into 9 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6. 9 times 12, 108. 9 times 10, 90. When I multiply 9 times 4 ninths, the 9's cross out, leaving me a negative 4r. If I add 4r to both sides, $10r plus 108 equals 90. If I subtract 108 from both sides, 10r is equal to a negative 18. R is equal to, these are both divisible by 2, negative 9 over 5. I see fractions. Lowest common denominator would be 6. 6 times 5 is 30. But when I multiply it by the next one, it cancels out. Okay. Lost my train of thought. Got interrupted. 6 times 5? 30. The 6 here is going to cancel out, leaving me a negative p. When I multiply this by 6, 3 is going to go to the 6 twice. It's going to give me 2p. When I multiply this by 6, it's going to give me negative 12. Adding p to both sides, I have 30 equals 3p minus 12. Adding 12 to both sides, 42 is equal to 3p. Dividing by 3, p is equal to 14. Okay. Tomorrow's quiz will be way less problems. You should expect somewhere between 15 and 20 questions of varying difficulty. But if you can do this worksheet, you should feel comfortable about doing tomorrow's quiz.